She was just a quiet girl in school, someone most people didn't notice much. She didn't speak a lot, didn't hang out with big groups, and never tried to be the center of attention. But there was one thing that made her different. She could play the piano like magic. At home, when everyone else was busy with their phones or school stress, she would sit at the old piano in her living room and play. Her fingers moved with feeling, and even though she never said much, her music told everything she was feeling inside. Her parents weren't rich, but they saved up just enough to buy her that second-hand piano a few years ago. It had scratches and missing polish, but to her, it was perfect. That piano had become her best friend. She practiced every day after school, sometimes skipping meals because she was too lost in the music. Even when things felt hard, like when she failed a test or didn't get invited to a party, she went straight to that piano. That's where she felt strong. When the school announced this year's talent show, her heart jumped. It was finally her chance to show people what she could do. Last year, she had been too afraid to sign up. She had watched others sing, dance, and play instruments, and she had told herself, next year, I'll do it. And now that year had come. She chose a classical piece for her performance, one that started soft, but slowly built into something powerful and full of emotion. She knew every note by heart. She had even added a few touches of her own, making the piece truly hers. Every time she played it, she felt like she was speaking through the piano. This wasn't just about impressing people. This was about finally being seen. The school had assigned a music coach to help the students prepare for the show. He had a good reputation, but many students said he was tough. When she met him for the first time, he barely looked at her. He just nodded and told her to start playing. Sat at the school's piano and played her heart out. She hoped he would say something nice when she finished. Instead, he just said, "Okay, next." She felt a bit small after that. Maybe he was just busy, she thought. Maybe he didn't mean to be cold. Still, she didn't stop practicing. Every afternoon, she stayed back after school, playing the same piece again and again. Some of her classmates would pass by and listen for a few minutes. One of them even told her quietly, "You're really good." As the talent show got closer, she worked harder than ever. Her hands hurt sometimes, but she didn't care. She dreamed of walking on that stage, sitting at the big piano in front of the crowd, and letting her music do all the talking. But what she didn't know was that someone else had different plans. The music coach had been watching all the students and had already decided in his mind who he thought were the stars. He believed some students had presence and confidence, and he didn't think this quiet girl fit into that group. She didn't know it yet, but her chance to perform was slowly slipping away, not because of her talent, but because someone didn't believe in her. Still, she kept showing up. Every day she opened the piano lid, placed her fingers on the keys, and played with everything she had. She didn't ask for attention. She just wanted one chance to be heard. She didn't know how things would turn out, but she had already promised herself this time she wouldn't back down. The music coach was someone people respected in the school. He'd experienced a serious face and a strict way of speaking. Many students felt nervous around him. He didn't smile much, and when he did, it felt like he was judging something in his head. He had helped students win awards before, so the school trusted his decisions. But that respect also made him powerful, maybe too powerful. From the first day of practice, it was clear he had favorites. He liked students who were loud, confident, and full of energy. If someone smiled big, talked fast, or acted like a star, he paid more attention to them. He praised them, guided them more closely, and gave them more time. But for students who were quiet or shy, he barely looked up from his notebook. And sadly, she was one of those students. Even though she played beautifully, he never said much. If she made a small mistake, he pointed it out right away. If others made bigger mistakes, he would say, "It's okay, just try again." It wasn't fair, but she didn't complain. She thought maybe he would see her hard work one day and finally notice what she could do. One day during practice, she finished playing her piece with full heart. She waited for a comment, maybe a small "well done" or even a nod. But the coach simply looked at the next student and said, "Your turn." That moment hit her like a stone. Still, she kept telling herself, it's okay. I'm here to play, not to please him. But the real shock came a few days before the talent show. After school, the coach called a short meeting with the performers. Everyone sat quietly, waiting to hear final details. That's when he dropped the news. There's been a small change, he said. Some performances will be adjusted for better stage flow. A few students will swap their pieces. She didn't understand what he meant at first. But then he turned toward her and added, you'll no longer be doing your solo. Another student will take your slot. You'll assist backstage with transitions. At that moment, her heart sank. She felt like she had been hit by something invisible. Her eyes widened, but her mouth stayed shut. She couldn't believe it. All those months of practice, all the effort, all the dreams gone in a second. The worst part was, the person replacing her hadn't even practiced the same piece. They were just chosen because, in the coach's eyes, they had more energy for the crowd. Nobody in the room said anything. Some looked down, others glanced at her for a second, then looked away. She wanted to speak, but her voice refused to come out. Instead, she stood up slowly, nodded once, and walked out of the room. Outside the hall, her hands trembled. Her throat felt tight. She didn't cry, but something inside her had cracked. She had never asked for special treatment. She had only wanted a fair chance. That night, she didn't touch the piano. It sat silently in the corner of the living room while she lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling. Her parents noticed her. Silence, but didn't press too hard. They knew something was wrong, but they also knew she needed space. As the night grew darker, she closed her eyes and remembered how it felt to play. Not for others, but for herself. Her fingers, the keys, the rhythm, all of it was still inside her. And somewhere deep down, a small voice whispered, "This isn't over yet." After that day, everything felt strange to her. The school hallways were the same, but they didn't feel warm anymore. Even the music room, which used to be her safe place, now reminded her of the moment her dream was taken away. She still came to school, attended her classes, and did her homework. But something inside her had gone quiet. She stopped smiling. She didn't talk much. It was like a small part of her had gone missing. A few friends noticed the change. One of them asked gently, "You okay?" She forced a smile and said, "Yeah, just tired." But she wasn't just tired. She was disappointed, hurt, and confused. She kept thinking, what did I do wrong? She had practiced more than anyone, stayed late after school, and given her heart to that performance. But in the end, it wasn't enough for the coach. Meanwhile, other students began preparing for the show. The one who replaced her seemed happy and excited. Wasn't trying to be mean, but he also didn't really understand how much that solo had meant to her. The coach praised him, gave him extra practice time, and called him a natural performer. Watching all this from the side, she felt invisible. But the truth was, she wasn't the only one who noticed the unfairness. The art teacher, who often stayed late after school to paint backdrops for the talent show, had quietly seen everything. She had watched the girl practicing in the empty music room, pouring her heart into the piano every single day. She had seen the way the coach treated her differently, and when she heard about the sudden change, she knew something wasn't right. One afternoon, the art teacher approached her in the hallway and softly said, "I heard about the switch. You were really looking forward to that solo, weren't you?" The girl just nodded. "You worked hard." "Don't let this break your spirit," the teacher added, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Later that day, the art teacher spoke to the principal. She didn't raise her voice or create a scene. She simply explained the situation. How? The girl had practiced for months, how she was suddenly replaced without warning, and how that didn't seem fair. The principal listened carefully, trusted the coach's experience, but he also respected the art teacher's honesty and care. For the students, a few teachers also started to speak quietly among themselves. Some had noticed how the coach often favored a certain type of student. They didn't say anything earlier, but now they began to question his decisions. The next morning, during homeroom, the girl was called to the principal's office. She felt nervous. Her heart was beating fast as she walked in. But instead of getting in trouble, she was met with calm, kind words. The principal said, We had a conversation with the teachers. I heard about what happened. You've decided that you'll be performing your solo at the talent show, just like originally planned." She couldn't believe it. Her eyes filled with tears, but she quickly wiped them away. She nodded, her voice still caught in her throat, and whispered, "Thank you." As she left the office, a sense of relief and hope washed over her. Through the hallway with a quiet smile, the first real one in days. She didn't feel angry at the person who replaced her, and she didn't even want revenge on the coach. She just wanted her chance, and now she had it. That evening, for the first time in a week, she sat back at her piano. She closed her eyes, placed her fingers on the keys, and let the music flow. It wasn't just practice this time. It was something deeper. This performance wasn't just for the audience anymore. It was for herself. This time she wasn't going to let anyone take it away. The days leading up to the talent show felt different now. She was still nervous, but there was a spark in her heart again. Knowing she had been given her chance back gave her strength. She had something to prove, not just to the coach or the school, but to herself. That she belonged on that stage. That her voice mattered, even if it came through music instead of words. She began practicing again, but this time with even more emotion. Every note she played carried the pain of being ignored and the joy of being given a second chance. Piano keys felt like old friends welcoming her back. Her hands moved smoothly, but her eyes often filled with quiet tears while she played. Not because she was sad, because she was finally feeling everything she had been holding inside. Meanwhile, something interesting was happening in the school. Word had started spreading among the students. Some were surprised to hear she got her solo back. A few even asked her softly, "You're really performing again?" She would just smile and say, "Yes." Their reactions were mixed. Some were happy, some were confused, but most were curious. Even students who had never paid attention to her before started to take notice. One afternoon during rehearsal, she walked into the auditorium and saw the coach sitting with crossed arms, watching another student. He didn't look at her when she entered. She quietly took her seat and waited for her turn. When it was finally time for her to practice, the room got a little quieter. Even the coach looked up, probably wondering how she would play now. She sat down at the piano, took a deep breath, and began. From the very first note, the room changed. The sound that came from her fingers wasn't just music, it was a message. Soft, gentle, but full of power. The notes rose and fell like waves, telling a story that words couldn't explain. A few students who had been chatting stopped to listen. Even the coach leaned forward slightly. When she finished, there was no clapping, just silence. But not the kind of silence that feels empty. This one felt full, like everyone was holding their breath. Then slowly, one of the students in the back nodded and whispered, "Wow." The coach didn't say anything. He simply looked down at his clipboard and moved on. But his silence meant something different now. It was no longer the silence of ignoring. Now it was the silence of realizing he may have been wrong. Later that evening, while walking home, she felt the wind brush her face. She looked up at the sky and smiled. For the first time in a long while, she felt proud of herself. Not because someone told her she was good, but because she had kept going even when things got unfair. Even when her heart felt heavy. At home, her parents noticed that change too. They didn't need to ask questions. They saw the way her eyes lit up when she talked about the show. They saw how she sat at the piano without being told, how she hummed softly while doing her homework. She was coming back to life. The night before the performance, she sat alone in her room looking at the outfit she would wear on stage. Her hands were a little shaky, but her heart was steady. She thought about everything that had happened. The pain, the unfairness, the tears, but also the quiet support from the teacher. The decision from the principal, and the way her classmates had begun to notice her. This performance was no longer just a school event. It was her moment to show that quiet people still have something powerful to say, and that sometimes the most beautiful voices are the ones people almost didn't hear. The evening of the talent show finally arrived. The school auditorium was full, more full than anyone had expected. Students came with their parents, teachers, took seats in the front rows, and the stage lights glowed brightly. There was excitement in the air, mixed with nervous energy. Some students were backstage fixing their outfits, others doing last-minute practice. Laughter, whispers, and clapping echoed around the hall. She stood quietly behind the curtain, holding her hands together, feeling her heart beat in her chest. Her name was on the list. She was getting her moment. But that didn't mean the fear had disappeared. Her palms were sweaty, and her legs felt weak. She wasn't used to crowds or attention. Now all eyes would be on her. She peeked through the side of the curtain. The coach sat in the front row with his arms folded, looking serious as always. A few teachers smiled and nodded as students performed. She saw her parents sitting near the back, both holding their phones, ready to record. They waved when they saw her. That small wave gave her a little more courage. Before her, a dance group finished their performance. The crowd clapped loudly. Then the host stepped on stage and said into the mic, "Next, we have a piano solo performance by one of our very own students." There was a short pause. "Please welcome her to the stage." The curtain opened. She walked slowly across the stage, trying to keep her steps steady. The spotlight hit her face, and the room suddenly felt too big, too quiet. But she kept moving. She sat at the piano, took a deep breath, and placed her fingers gently on the keys. Then she began to play. The first few notes floated softly into the air, like a calm breeze after a storm. The room went completely silent. Even the students who were chatting in the back stopped. Her fingers moved gracefully, touching every key with care and feeling. It wasn't just a performance. It was a story. A story of struggle, of quiet pain, of silent strength. As the music built up, so did the emotions. Her eyes were half closed, lost in the rhythm. She wasn't thinking about the coach, the crowd, or the past. She was inside the music. Every note spoke the words she had never said out loud. She played not for approval, but from her heart. The final part of the piece was full of energy, fast, emotional, almost like a cry. Then suddenly, it ended. Her fingers lifted, the sound faded, and for a few seconds, there was silence. Then came the applause. First soft, then louder. People stood up, clapping hard, some even whistling. Her parents were smiling through tears. A few students in the front row stood on their feet. Even the art teacher, standing in the corner, clapped. Proudly, the coach didn't clap right away, just looked at her. His face didn't show much emotion, but for the first time, his eyes looked different. Not cold, not harsh, but thoughtful. She stood, bowed gently, and walked off the stage. Her hands were still shaking, but her heart felt light. A few students came to her with quiet smiles. One said, "That was beautiful." Another just gave her a thumbs up. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. The music had already said everything. That night, as the show continued, whispers about her performance spread through the crowd. Some parents were asking, "Who was that girl?" Others were saying, "Why wasn't she given more attention before?" The show would end soon, but something had already changed. People had seen her, really seen her, and nothing could take that moment away. After her performance, the whole atmosphere of the show seemed to shift. It wasn't something loud or obvious. It was quiet but strong. It's the kind of feeling that stays with people even after the moment has passed. She had walked off that stage without saying a word, but her music was still echoing in people's minds. Back in the audience, people were whispering. A few parents leaned toward each other and said things like, "She was amazing," or "That felt so real." Some students who never really noticed her before were now asking, "Why doesn't she talk more? She's so talented," even after. Other performances came and went. The feeling of her solo stayed in the room. Behind the scenes, she sat quietly on a bench, her hands still warm from the piano keys. She wasn't sure how to feel. There was happiness, but also disbelief. It all happened so fast. 1 week ago, she thought she wouldn't be allowed to perform. Now she had received a standing ovation. She heard someone walk up behind her. It was the same student who had been picked to replace her earlier. Looked a little awkward, scratching the back of his head. "Hey," he said, you played really well out there." She gave a soft smile and nodded. He didn't say much else, but the way he spoke told her he meant it. That small moment felt like a gentle apology, without needing many words. But what happened next was something no one had expected. During the closing speech, the host came back on stage to thank everyone, students, teachers, and parents, for making the night special. But before ending, he added something that wasn't in the script. "I think we all felt something powerful tonight," he said. "One performance stood out not because of flashy lights or loud music, but because it came from the heart. It reminded us what real talent looks like: quiet, humble, and strong." The audience began clapping again. The girl sat backstage, surprised. She didn't expect to be mentioned. Her face turned a little red, but inside she felt proud, really proud. The coach was sitting in the front row, and for the first time that evening, he looked uneasy. People around him had started to notice the way he had handled the situation. Some students were already talking about it openly now. Why was she almost cut from the show? Who made that decision? She's clearly better than half. The people who performed, the crowd didn't turn against him in a loud or angry way, but there was a quiet disapproval, shift in how people saw him. Some teachers gave him short glances. Even the principal seemed less impressed by him now. The next day in the school hallways, she walked with a calm face. But this time, people noticed her. Not because of anything she said, but because of what she had shown them. A few students smiled at her. Some gave her nods of respect. One teacher even stopped her and said, "You reminded us all why music matters," and the coach. He didn't say anything. Walked past her in the hallway, slower than usual, eyes focused on the ground. Maybe he was thinking. Maybe he realized he had judged too fast. Or maybe deep down, he knew he had been wrong, but she didn't need his approval anymore. She had already proven something bigger, that even when you're quiet, even when people underestimate you, even when things seem unfair, your light can still shine. And sometimes the world sees you in the moment you least expect it. The days after the talent show felt like a dream to her. Everything around her was the same school, same classrooms, same faces. Something inside her had changed. It was like a quiet confidence had grown in her heart. Not the loud kind that shows off, but the kind that helps you walk a little taller and breathe a little easier. She didn't suddenly become the most popular student, and she didn't want that. But now, when people passed her in the hallways, they looked at her differently. Some smiled, some nodded, and a few even came up to say, "You were amazing that night." She didn't know how to respond to all the attention. She always said thank you with a shy smile. One afternoon, she walked past the music room, the same room where she had practiced alone for weeks, the same room where she had once felt ignored. She paused outside the door. The coach was inside, teaching a group of younger students. Their voices echoed out as they asked questions and played soft notes. She didn't feel angry at him anymore. She had moved past that moment. What mattered now was that she got her chance, and she had used it well. That evening, she went home and sat in front of her old piano. The wooden keys were still slightly chipped, and the paint was fading, but to her, it was beautiful. She touched the keys gently, not to practice, but just to feel them again. This was where it had all started. This was where she had found her voice. Her parents came into the room and sat quietly on the couch behind her. Her father said, "We're proud of you." Her mother added, "You didn't just play music, you touched hearts." Their words made her eyes water, but she wiped the tears quickly and smiled. For so long, she had wondered if her playing meant anything to anyone. Now she knew it did. The school didn't make a big announcement, but word continued to spread. A teacher from another school even visited and asked her to perform at a local youth event. She was nervous again, but this time, she said yes. She had learned that nerves were normal and they didn't have to stop her anymore at that next event. She performed with more peace in her heart. The crowd clapped, people praised her, and some even asked where she learned to play like that. She simply said, "At home," because that was the truth. It wasn't fancy lessons or big studios. It was just her piano, and her love for music. Back at school, the coach stayed quiet. He didn't say much about what had happened. But one day during lunch, he passed by her and said, "You have a gift. Keep playing," that was all. Just one line, but it was enough. She didn't need more than that. She nodded and replied, "I will." What happened that week taught her a lesson that would stay with her forever. Life isn't always fair. Sometimes people overlook you, judge you, or push you aside. But that doesn't mean you should stop. What matters is that you stay true to who you are, that you keep showing up, keep giving your best, and believe in your worth even. Because sooner or later, the world does notice. And when your moment comes, it speaks louder than any words ever could. She didn't become famous. She didn't win any big prize. But she walked away with something more powerful, a quiet victory that no one could take away. And from that day on, whenever she sat at the piano, she played not just with her fingers, but with her whole heart.